For great ideas and practical tools you can start using tomorrow to grow your business and separate you from the competition, you've come to the right place. If you're into B2B marketing and sales, then welcome to the one and only B2B Marketing and Sales Podcast. With over 60 and counting total years in the trenches of businesses small and large, they have a plethora of knowledge and experience that generate you more leads, capture more clients, ring up more sales. Well, doggone it, just make you more money. How about that? Always thought-provoking, yet dubiously entertaining. Please welcome to their respective microphones across 3 time zones, your co-ringmasters, the Dave Loomis, and not the rock star, Steve Miller.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the B2B Marketing and Sales Podcast with none other than yours truly, Dave Loomis. I'm here again without my co-host, Steve Miller. But that's okay, because I'm joined with one of my good friends from a long time, Jim Gilmore, who is, there's a long list of things. First, I'll say welcome, Jim.
Well, thank you.
Jim and I have known each other for quite some time in a lot of different ways. Right now, Jim wears a lot of hats. He's a professor at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, which also has Weatherhead School of Management, and he teaches in both of those organizations. He founded a consulting firm called Strategic Horizon that has had a great run of success over the years, including some very, very cool events. And he's probably most known for a book, not to mention a Harvard Business Review article, which it's still in the top 10 of most reprints or requested.
Who knows? I would think it's one of their better articles over the years, I suspect. I don't know if it's quite up there with marketing myopia, but...
Right, exactly. Well, so Jim co-wrote a book called The Experience Economy, Work is Theater and Every Business a Stage, which, if you haven't read it, it's timeless. There's examples in it, obviously, that refer to certain things that maybe aren't happening, anymore. It doesn't really matter, because the concept is so powerful. And we're gonna talk about that. We'll circle back on that in a minute. But the other thing is the latest book called Look, A Practical Guide for Improving Your Observational Skills, which is fascinating, and I want to get into that a little bit too, because there's kind of an interesting event or sort of group activity that Jim's been doing in association with the contents from the book. So let's start with the experience economy, because, as I said, it just has legs and legs, and it's interesting. Do you think that people were using the word experience very much like they are now with user experience and UX and all that kind of stuff before you wrote this book?
Oh, not in the same way. It's being used in ways beyond what I think we even intended. But, words do matter. I do think part of the success of the experience economy, besides attaching itself or being about a long-term structural shift in the economy, which is why the book, I think, is enduring regardless of how many of the examples continue to be in business or not. But what we basically articulated in the book, over 20 years ago, is that experiences are a distinct form of output, economic output. That experiences are as distinct from services as services are from goods. So we're not just talking about a premium service or excellent service. We're talking about something different in kind. So services being the activities that an organization would perform or put a price tag on if they're in the service business. That's sort of what a company does, the activities. But experiences is time. It's charging. It's as an economic offering. It's charging for the time that people spend in some place or event, like a trade show, charging both the exhibitor just to spend time and charging the participant to as well, but also just the time you spend with customers that you may not be charging for. So the design of experiences, thinking about experiences different in kind than services, and certainly different than manufacturing. One of the things we did in the updated edition of the book, so the book was published let's do a little book stuff if we can as an author. The book was published. The book was published in 1999. Statistics from my own publisher, Harvard Business Review Press. They shared with me some time ago, so this might be slightly dated, but I'm sure the order of magnitude is correct. About 10,000 business books published every year in English, and 90% of them will not sell 10,000 copies. And of those that do sell 10,000 copies, 90% of them will sell their 10,000 copies within the first 6 months, even certainly the first year, and then they're over. So lesson for your listeners is don't buy any contemporary business books till at least 6 months. Harvard re-released our book in hardcover after 20 years. That's a rare thing. So, for 10, 15 years, we sold well over 10,000 copies every year as people continue to discover the book, as the message continues to resonate. One of the things we did in the preface for the updated edition, which was released in paperback, and now that edition has been re-released in hardcover, is we identified 5 different directions in which experience thinking, if you will, has gone since we published the book. One is in name only, which you start calling things you currently do an experience, even though you don't change anything. So instead of customer service, we call it a customer experience with no change in what you're doing. So I'm not an advocate of that, of course.
That reminds me of
right. Everybody's calling things experience, whether it's user experience.
Right. I mean, I do.
Everything's an experience, and it does a disservice to it. Then there is there's experiential marketing, a term that actually did not exist. We wrote our book, and then Bert Schmidt wrote a book by that title. So that's applying experience thinking to marketing. So less reliance on traditional marketing and advertising. Even in business realm, but certainly in the consumer world, and more event-based marketing. So that's and even in B2B, traditionally the trade shows, the long-established event-based marketing or experience marketing. But as companies host their own events, and they'll sometimes even create their own venues. The long-standing client of mine, Whirlpool, open up a World of Whirlpool in Chicago. So instead of going to trade shows, in fact, they financed it by stop going to trade shows, actually, and then used that money to have their own destination venues. So when clients are in Chicago, they could go to this environment. And it's all demand creation, it's all traditional marketing, but having customers spend time in a place where, unlike an appliance store, the appliances actually work. You can actually use them. You can turn them on. Kitchen vignettes that actually work. So you have experiential marketing, right? Places and events that create demand in lieu of traditional advertising. Then you have the application of experiences to operations, which some are calling a customer experience management or CEM, and not just CRM, 2.0, but actually applying experience thinking about the customer's time moment to moment through operations, not just the activities that you perform. Then there's what Joe and I really care about, which is experience offerings, which is to charge explicitly for the experience, to make it your product, if you will. And then there's the digital realm, which is everything I've already mentioned in the digital realm. So in name only, digital experiences, digital marketing experiences, digital operations, digital charging for people to spend time on a game site or some other type of electronic venue. So, it's clearly in the milieu today. It's people use the term, don't always think about what they mean by it, and they're other than a name only, they're all valid applications. There's some value to be added by thinking about demand creation or marketing from an event perspective. There's value to think about operations, not just what you do, but how you do it, not just your activity, but rather the time your customers have interacting with your activity. And then, clearly we encourage more and more organizations to think more and more about actually charging for experiences. And in B2B, there might be challenging sometimes, but in fact, business sometimes can have a greater opportunity, to create a forum that you charge for. I mean, I've told companies, okay, you've got research going on, which you invest all that money in research and then hope to come up with some innovation on the back end that you can charge for. Well, why not charge customers or prospective customers a subscription to participate in your research? So you're charging for a learning experience over time, and maybe they get first rights at the output, or they get a discount in the back end, or whatever it might be. So there are different. Again, it's an economic offering. How do you charge for time and not just for experience? And then, of course, I should add that in the book we wrote about what's after experiences as well, which I think has some real business-to-business implications, which is transformations. So we anticipated the buying and selling of change. My most recent Harvard Business Review article was January, February of last year, 2022. So to give you that idea, it's, there's 5 things you can sell: commodities, goods, services, experiences. And then we anticipated transformations as well. And here at B2B, it's not just charging for time, but can companies charge for demonstrated outcomes? A definition of a transformation. Most clearly a consulting firm, which sort of charges for
absolutely
time and materials. And sometimes I might argue they leave money on the table, because if you could get a percentage of the results you achieve for your customer, you might make more money. You might actually help your customer increase revenue even more, cut costs even more. So, and that's not just consulting. I think a lot of business, can you charge for the ends and not the means? Peter Drucker once said, your customers are always buying something other than what you think you're selling to them. They're always at one level of abstraction beyond, somebody buys a pen or to get the writing service. So if you understand the value that you're creating for customers, can you charge explicitly for that value as an end and not just the means? So, and sometimes doing so, I might argue, will actually help achieve that result better than letting the customer sort of have to piece together all the different services they acquire independently, as opposed to putting somebody in charge and not get paid until they achieve the result.
Well, putting your money where your mouth is. I mean,
exactly.
Risk reward for sure.
Right. I'll give an example of that. Again, not to do too much on transformation necessarily, but it's the golf pro that charges for lessons. They're charging for time, but you want to become a better golfer. Well, why not charge for that? Why not explicitly charge for reduction in handicap? Right. Now, the reason is because the golf pro would have to behave differently. They can't just show up for the lesson. And that's exactly right. But sometimes that improvement is not achieved because the coach is not playing an actual round with you, analyzing your game more closely, giving you a wider portfolio of hand-eye coordination exercises or readings materials. And again, by analogy, any business, if you want to get paid for demonstrated outcomes, you're likely going to have to behave differently. But again, you can always say, what are the results your customers are not achieving, right? That they're frustrated with, and could you address those by charging for it? And I sometimes think business to business has. It is
interesting because it would force you to understand exactly the starting point with every customer, which you can't measure an end point without knowing what the starting point is. And second of all, it just forces you to understand the levers that you can or can't pull within that organization and politics to do so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it can get complex, and especially in business relationships. But again, it's related to experiences because that change only is affected by the experiences that you provide that are underneath. And maybe to put a bow on all this, the whole way we came up with this set of ideas is my co-author Joe Pine wrote a book called Mass Customization, and Joe for years was fond of saying, if you customize a good, you automatically turn that good into a service. So think Dell Computer before they lost their way. They never for decades they never made goods and placed it in the inventory, waiting for somebody to come along. They made computers in response to actual orders. They were computer making service. Similarly, if you customize a service, you automatically turn that service into experience. Customize the service, customize an experience, turn that experience into a transformation. So that's sort of the big overall picture. So
okay.
All of our work, customization is woven in throughout throughout all our work. So instead of mass production, in your heart of hearts wanting to do one thing for everybody, to really understand the unique needs of individual customers, that's where next generation of value is to be found, in our estimation.
Absolutely. And I think that holds up regardless of, there's been a lot of technology changes in marketing. There have been a lot of changes in the economy, the global economy. Now we're post-pandemic and supply chain short, and all sorts of things. But still, at the end of the day, your premise holds up.
Yeah, you got to create value. When competitors are able to create the same value, then you become commoditized, and you got to find new ways to create value, unless you have patent on something. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's short lived, but yeah, it's always, business is always tough, right? So hopefully the things we've written are helpful frameworks and tools to help companies to think more richly about how they can create value in the world.
Right. Well, I think one thing that has always been, I've always had a lot of interest in our conversations, has been that you have the ability to look at things in different ways, more than many people that I've ever met. A casual observer might call it, oh, he's so creative. Oh, he comes up with these ideas. But in your book called Look, I think what you're trying to do is to instruct people that they can see things from different perspectives and angles, and therefore come up with different observations and ideas and so forth from that. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, so the headline for the book Look is that all innovation begins with observation. To see pay more close attention, noticing things, noticing the unfulfilled needs of a customer, even things they may not even realize for themselves. But they're, part of my early interest in this area is you can talk to customers, and a lot of people talk about this. I mean, what they say in focus groups or interviews is so preconditioned by what they've already experienced, and they may not even be aware themselves. So yeah, just to be more observant, and more time, of course, is spent observing what's on the screen, all of which is derivative, versus spending time observing direct, immediate circumstances. By the way, not just of your own customers, your own business, but not just your industry, if we do concentric circles, but just broader culture, just understanding what's happening out there. So that's the premise. I've dedicated the book to Edward de Bono. You mentioned creativity. I should. A lot of people say, hey, Jim, you're so creative. But yeah, I have to give homage to, maybe I had always had a propensity to try to seek the new idea, but Edward de Bono wrote a book called Lateral Thinking, which I discovered at a used discount book rack one time, and just changed my world. Particularly this chapter where he bashes brainstorming. He says brainstorming is so passive, it doesn't tell you what to do actively. Don't judge ideas, build on the ideas of others, come up with wild ideas, but doesn't tell you how to do any of that. So the notion of deliberately and consciously moving to a new idea, and one of the things there, if I can, without getting into all the techniques of de Bono, but the notion of always looking for the underlying concept of what's going on. So you observe X that's happening in the world, but what's really underneath that? What's in fact, if anyone wants to go get lateral thinking, there's an exercise in the book about how many ways can you divide a square into 4 equal area pieces, something I have my students do. Most people come up with 4, right? And they get stuck, like, well, that's all there is. But in fact, if you see underlying concepts, not to give it away if anybody wants to go try this, but if there are a dozen different underlying concepts, that once you see that, it opens up. In fact, there's multiple infinite set of answers to that exercise. So once develop this and say, like, okay, what's really going on here? And then you combine that with notion of all ideas of the bifurcation of 2 planes. Okay, here's what's going on here. Just take my own book, The Experience Economy. 3 chapters in the Experience Economy on the idea that work is theater. Right. So we take my business acumen of working for Procter & Gamble, and I consulted for 10 years, largely in supply chain. Okay, there's a field, but then go intersect that with knowledge from theater, right? That you don't interview people, you audition them. It's set design, acting with intention. I mean, salespeople acting with intention.
Right.
I remember reading a theater book. I forget which one book I got this from. Oh man, I should be able to achieve this better. But you perform blank in order to blank. That's how you define intention. So, for example, again, perform blank, the activity, in order to blank, the intention. Classic example is, you knock on the door to get anybody who might be in there? Or do you knock on the door? I assume you could hear that. My dog heard that. Or do you knock on the door in order to get one person without disturbing somebody else? Whereas you do the task differently depending on your intention. So again, even just a salesperson having presence, just being much more intentional about how you say things, what you do, how you enter a room, even what briefcase you have or business card, or how you give the business card. That's all theater, So again, a lot of new thinking simply comes by the intersection of two different disciplines. And again, a lot of that I got. In fact, De Bono, that's well known. A guy by the name of Alton Kessler talked about bifurcation of two planes. But De Bono talks about take what you're interested in, what you want new ideas about. How do I get this customer to buy from this? How do we close this deal? How do we get more business from customer A? De Bono will pick just a random word is one of his techniques. So you just take something at random and have that collide on your topic and see what emerges. And that's again, so once I discovered lateral thinking, that just really solidified and I think helped me immensely. And I try to certainly teach my students. I encourage businesses, and I dedicated look to De Bono because the inside the book is a tool called 6 Looking Glasses, metaphorical tool for 6 different ways to look at the world that might help you see things you might not otherwise notice without this contrived metaphorical lenses. Well, it was all inspired by De Bono's 6 thinking hats and also his book 6 Action Shoes, which has a similar metaphorical thinking caps or action shoes, planning your actions. So in some sense, book is a prequel to those two other books. And the other thing I learned from De Bono is just practical, simple tools. Any client I have or you have, you're never going to know their business as well as they know themselves. So my orientation is to give them new thinking tools. You take that combination, a new tool, a new framework, combined with business know-how, that's the winning. Again, that's a bifurcation of two planes as well.
And then you teach this in some, I would say, I've been to a mini version of this a couple of years ago when you took a group through it, but there was an extended version that you have now. I don't know if you call it sort of like a seminar or a group project.
We do have a certification program, which we do every August. You go to strategichorizons.com and check. That's a week long, not cheap. We basically go in depth through the book. But yeah, I now teach a Case Western, which is fun because now I get to experiment with new teaching techniques. But yes, I teach a design course for MBA. I guess I could pitch our part-time MBA program if anybody's watching. That's,
of course, yeah.
Still considering that. But the spine of that course is the design of goods, physical things, the design of services, activities, and then design of experiences, design of time. So that's the basic spine. But then I augment that with classes on observational skills, ideation skills, even conversation skills. I do stuff on presentation skills. So I do that about adjunct for 4 years at Case. I just finished my 6th year full time. And then undergraduate, I was adjunct. I came on board full time to basically reinvent Management 201, undergraduate management. So what's sort of there is sometimes when I teach a course, I think some of the stuff is basic, but it's basic that like everyday business people ought to be reminded of. And I start the whole course with a Peter Drucker quote: "The managers create the conditions in which others work." And that's a design issue. People don't want to manage people, but what are the conditions in which you have an effective and efficient organization? So, that's the whole headline for that. And then I have to do some basic functional things with students. But again,
that certainly is a hot topic right now with the work at home debate, exactly. As you might say, because it's a back and forth. But talk about ripple effect. And now every day we're reading about, I don't know, be dramatic and use the word collapse of commercial real estate, but certainly a lot of changes in commercial real estate because of that. And those are conditions under which we work. And some people are loving those conditions. Some people not so much. Some managers like Jamie Dimon are back and forth on the whole thing. You can only force people to do so many things.
Here's an interesting application for experiences. It's the workplace experience. In other words,
yes.
if you're just creating the conditions people do activity, well, the services they perform, doesn't really matter where you spend time doing that. In other words, if experience is about places and events, it's place based. But if it doesn't matter what place the activities perform, how do you attract employees to spend time in a collective effort? It's only if the time is of value. So the office experience needs to be such that you get some value, you come up with thoughts, you get some efficiency that you would not get unless you were to have, and that's designing the time. And in fact, I have a client that's done work historically with conferences and external events, and now have pivoted to say, well, how do we apply that same thinking internally? It's almost like every day is a conference in the office. What's the intelligence? What's the information you get? What's the networking? What are the things you traditionally go off-site to go like, no, we need to bring that every day. Or if we're going to ask people to come in 2 days a week, well, those 2 days can't be the same as what I could be doing at home. All you've done is wasted my time making me commute.
Wow, so that's really interesting.
I might even argue a transition period back is to fact have people come back just a day a week, but make sure you design that day to be fundamentally different in kind in terms of how employees spend their time versus spending it at home. If it's the same as what you spend at home, why would you want to go? I've worked out ever since I left a larger firm. I've had a home office. I have a 30-second commute. That's nice. You don't have to see below my waist what I'm doing here on Zoom. I can drink out of a red Solo cup. Don't do that. Won't tell you what's in it. Hard to do that in the workplace. So.
Yeah, exactly. So let me give you I'm surprising you with this example, but for the B2B world, if I'm a B2B marketing person, let's say I work for a ball bearing manufacturer. There's a big one in our region. And I sell, my ball bearings to machine companies, obviously, people who use ball bearings, right? What's one of the techniques from the look book that could help somebody see things differently rather than just saying, oh yeah, go and observe those people using your ball bearings? Or what can they do
it's a great question. And we'll do observation, then we'll talk about what else can they do. But observation wise, one of the techniques in the book is simply to have what I actually call a curiosity list. So, and we can direct it, like, what are you curious about in terms of your customers? And I use a very simple thing. I use the alphabet. I call it my A to XYZ list. XYZ is one bucket because there are tougher letters. But for every letter of the alphabet, XYZ being one bucket, what are you curious to know more about with your customers? Do you have a list? Right? So what are those 24 four things? And then go observe that. So having a particular list of things is helpful. And if you struggle to come up with that list, it's like, well, why? I mean, in fact, I would argue you should have multiple lists. You should have multiple categories, and every category, let's just do deliveries. 24 things about deliveries you're curious about. Maintenance, 24 things about maintenance you're invoicing, 24 things about invoicing you're curious about. Have multiple lists. So again, I'm influenced by DeBono. Know what you want ideas about, DeBono talks about. So what do you want to have more observations about? The other thing I could argue, just even operationally, is pick a different activity or pick a different place to just intensely look at. I've had retail clients where I'll do something like every day pick a different spot to go look. And you'll see basic maintenance issues. Basic maintenance. And I'll tell you an observational application that I just came across recently. And I think it can quite to ball bearings as well. But a longstanding client of mine is a restaurant company out of Atlanta, and they're famous for a chicken sandwich.
I've got you. Okay.
Anyway, And I was visiting recently when I was in Atlanta, and I got a tour of Chick-fil-A's Innovation Center, and they have all these awards up on the wall for different projects, and one of which was clearly based on observation, which is for decades operationally, when they made biscuits, they basically had this have a sheet of dough, and they just would stamp out the round biscuits. And then one day someone just looked at it and went, why are we using a circle? Because they have all the extra edges around the circles, which either has to be collected and redone on a sheet, or if things are too busy, actually disposed of. And so why don't we just use a hexagon so that there's no space in between the cuts? Millions and millions of dollars saved in labor and or waste thrown away. And I mean, you just notice that the shape mattered. Okay, that's a biscuit. It's back, but it's back of the house. I mean, to get close to ball bearings, it's back of the house. It's customers not seeing it, and when the dough rises, nobody can tell whether it's a circle or hexagon. Either way, it doesn't matter. Nobody sees it. That's sort of the way I feel about B2B, by the way. There's a lot of stuff that the public doesn't see. Well, there's
we don't see ball bearings.
Back of the house. Anything. Here's something what to go observe. What are other industries besides your own you can observe, even consumer businesses, where you can look at their back of the house? Because their back of the house is normally B2B, right? So just because you're a B2B company, don't think you can't learn from consumer goods or consumer offerings. You can, because they have operations too.
Absolutely.
Again, it could be. I don't know ball bearing business, but how many eaches are in a container and how much waste there is in opening up cartons or whatever, or just processing. Memex Procter & Gamble. I remember I left. I got about a year in before I left when we first started to do total quality management with cross-functional teams, and
TQM.
Actually visiting customers. I was in logistics, actually visiting a grocer's warehouse and seeing how they stack things and how they process things. And I remember years later, I was doing a project for Wawa food markets outside of Philadelphia. It was actually a project to revisit all of their sourcing. They had run out of capacity at their dairy. They're like, should we expand the dairy? Should we try to buy milk on the open market? And the partners to whom I worked for at the time, because I was still a junior bean, successfully said, look, let's do a total inbound rationalization project. Let's reevaluate, who you're buying direct from, who you're buying from wholesalers and so forth. And I remember touring Miller Hartman wholesaler outside of Philadelphia and seeing a case of Bounty towels. And what was remarkable about this case of Bounty towels, there was one on a pallet. So instead of smaller cases with 24 rolls inside, the case was the size of a pallet in terms of length, width, and height. And you took the lid off and grabbed eaches of Bounty towels. And I'm sure it was a result of the work I'd done that had started when I was with P&G and then left. If you just observe how paper towels get handled at a wholesaler going to Wawa, you realize they cut the top of the cases off with a knife, and sometimes there's damage because you'll cut the inner thing. Well, you throw that away; it's waste, right? And all the extra labor in terms of, because you ship a whole case of Bounty towels to an independent one Wawa store, it's like a 3-year supply. They're shipping eaches, but the packaging's not designed for eaches. Again, so it's that kind of operational thing. Just look how things are handled. Invoicing, extra work. By the way, you can observe with your ears, listening on phone calls. Just observe what is going on. Sometimes I look at clients, they would go like, "It's your business. Why are you not doing? Why do you not have almost exhaustive knowledge of how everything happens?" And this is my old P&G at Procter & Gamble.
So is there a difference between curiosity and question everything?
They're related, of course. Right?
They're related, right?
So again, I tie.
We have a lot of assumptions.
Curiosity, right?
We have a lot of assumptions, and actually, I've heard of techniques of reversing hidden assumptions, just to see what would happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. So again, it's you mentioned ball bearings, B2B. I mean, sometimes you can think it's mundane, but what's nice about B2B, in my view, is if you observe something, sometimes it's a lot easier to make happen, to affect the change. Because sometimes you only have to find a single customer, right, that's willing to work with you, that sees the better way, because maybe they have to make some adjustments too. But then you've got a built-in case study that convince customer 2 and customer 3 and customer 4 on down the line. I mean, sometimes you're a consumer goods with the masses. For McDonald's to change anything with like over 20,000 stores, that's a monumental task, right? Because it has to be uniform across the thing. But B2B, you can take your A customers, whatever, or your smallest customer and start there because they're hungry, whatever it could be. So sometimes if you can, it might be harder to come up with ideas. I think it is in the experience space. But once you come up with it, another thing besides observation, David, I call this which I'd be remiss not to mention for your listeners or your viewers. I call this the most neglected but powerful idea in the experience economy, which is something we call customer sacrifice. Right?
What's that?
Right. It's an ugly term. It's meant to be. Some people might call it customer compromise, but customer sacrifice, and basically it's a metric to layer on top of customer satisfaction. Most organizations realize you need to have satisfied customers, but if I use J.D. Power's definition of customer satisfaction is the gap between what customers expect and what they perceive they get. Okay, so it's the gap between what customers expect and what they perceive they get. Perfectly good definition, good measure. You want satisfied customers, i.e., you want to meet expectations. But we think there's so much more value to look at customer sacrifice, which we define as the gap between what customers settle for and what they want exactly. So again, it's the gap between what each customer settles for versus what they want exactly. And customer sacrifice is created anytime you have a mass-produced good or service, or you do things one standard way for everybody, because right. people want certain dimensions. Now you can't customize everything. Don't think about customizing everything. You go broke doing that. But it's discerning what dimension of your offering, if customized, would get rid of sacrifice. The reason to customize, which is sort of our background of our work, is because you have the greatest standard deviation of the exact way people want something, and you're doing it one way. And they value that dimension. And there's a world of sacrifice. Your ball bearing company, every company has got dimensions in which customers are selling for something other than what they want exactly. So part is to go observe and understand that with your customers. And I usually ask, what's the one dimension of sacrifice, if you were to eliminate, would create the greatest value? Don't get rid of it all, and go on that journey looking for, what is it we're doing one standard way, and got to understand. By the way, you have to understand individual customer needs to do that. And by the way, the term individual customer should be unnecessary. That's a redundancy. And the only reason I have to qualify the noun customer with the adjective individual is because they're not treated individually. Right? If they were all treated individually, I wouldn't have to use that term. But that's work, right? Oh, we have to go understand individual needs. Yeah, that's exactly what you have to go do. Versus sitting back and do it one standard way, the way you've always done it. Well, yeah, you can do that for a while, but after a while, when the negotiations, the price goes down and competition comes in, you need to actively be looking for ways to create new value, and it's out there. Sacrifice, I think, is a key. So a combination of observe,
yes.
behaviors,
yes.
and analyze sacrifice. And by the way, here's a connective tissue. You are not going to identify sacrifice by asking customers where they sacrifice. I've done that in the early days of this concept. I have a couple stories I tell about sacrifice, and then I tell
right.
Basically, well, I won't tell a story, but and you just ask customers, and they'll like, where do you sacrifice? They'll go, I don't know. Customers are so accustomed to not getting what they want exactly, they don't even know how to think about it. So you have to observe. Difficult. You have to observe. How do they jury rig something? What are their workarounds? What are things that they do? What do they discard? By the way, there's two kinds of sacrifice. Getting rid of all sacrifices of value to customer. But some sacrifice is because you're providing customers with too much. And that's wasteful.
Yes.
Everybody gets the same stuff in the box.
What can you cut back on?
Right. So it can be really wasteful. You want to give here's the mantra. You want to give customers only and exactly what they want.
Wow.
Right? And if you're giving away too little, then you have to provide more. But there's lots of times we're providing customers more than they want, giving more resources, more packaging that they want, and it would actually save money to understand the exact needs of customers.
Yeah, I love it. I just
So
got
that concept's in the experience economy, which I guess I wish more people would read it and take it to heart.
So I buy my coffee, like Pete's coffee pods for the Keurig. I buy them in a box that's like 75 of these pods in a box. I buy it from Amazon, and it used to be this box came in an Amazon box, and I'd open the box, and then I'd take this big box out.
A box in a box.
Yeah,
right.
Now it just comes in the actual box, in the coffee box. It doesn't say Amazon on the outside. It says Pete's Coffee, and there's an Amazon sticker, and and I'm thankful for that. Now, I'm sure I'm going to get notes about how wasteful my coffee pods are, but there's other angles to that, including wasted coffee from, making too much and other things related.
And even the
paper filters.
There's a B2B changer, because Pete's Coffee and Amazon had a conversation probably about making Pete's box more stronger to withhold shipping.
No doubt
about that. And that's a B2B conversation that they had.
Yeah.
That's definitely saving Amazon money and saving them boxes. So
right, we'll see.
The question is also saving Pete, but then Pete should similarly,
exactly.
By the way, you do Pete's. If I can do a little coffee, but my son-in-law turned me on to community coffee.
Okay.
Like a dark coffee, and I can get 2 cups out of the one pod, so that'll reduce your waste as well.
Ooh, that's interesting. Okay.
Don't lift the lid back. Don't lift the lid back up. So you want to keep that first hole. But I tell you, there's waste there. Is in fact, people's assumption. People think it's 1 cup per pod, not necessarily so.
Interesting. I'm going to try it. So the time has flown by, and this has been fantastic. I have lots of questions and curiosities from even just our conversation, as usual. But this was fantastic. Jim, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for
sharing
giving me the time.
Yeah, just fantastic. And what's the best way to reach you if anybody?
strategichorizons.com, and you can take it from there. Our managing partner is Doug Parker, and get a hold of him. And if you have any interest in our certification program, or go to Amazon, obviously, get the books, or your better bookseller.
Yeah, highly recommend the Look Practical Guide for Improving Your Observation Skills. We talked about, obviously, the experience economy and strategic horizons. Thank you, Jim Gilmore.
Welcome, Dave.
This has been the B2B Marketing and Sales Podcast. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the one and only B2B Marketing and Sales Podcast, the source for B2B marketing and sales insight. If you enjoyed the podcast, please be sure to subscribe and leave these old guys a 5-star rating. Check the show notes for any links and contact information. You can always contact us by going to b2bmarketingsalespodcast.com. Thank you, and keep on marketing, keep on selling.